With its top 8 inches candidates, American Idol's 23rd season is getting hotter. Even though there can only be one winner, the other competitors still have supporters. Fans posted their responses on social media after a recent elimination on the program truly caught them off guard. Miranda Lambert appeared as a guest coach in the May 4, 2025, edition. Ashanti, Josh Groban, and artist-in-residence, Jelly Roll have all visited with the candidates this season. Last season's champion, Abby Carter, also made a comeback to the stage. The highlight of the evening was seeing which 2 of the top 10 would be exiting the program, although she did play her new single, Burned, on the show that began her career. In the end, Colby Jordan and Kanan James Hill were the 2 players eliminated. This indicates that the top 8 consists of John Foster, Josh King, Jamal Roberts, Matthew Pruitt, Thunderstorm Artis, Slater Nally, Gabby Salmon, and Brianna Nix. Many people thought that Hill was deviating from his typical gospel repertoire when he sang Carrie Underwood's Love Wins. Jordan, for her part, sang The Chain by Fleetwood Mac. Eventually, someone had to leave the event. However, other fans expressed their shock at seeing the 2 go on social media. Despite this setback, many fans expressed their optimism that the 2 would still go on to have successful careers. In instance, one admirer commented, "All my mom's church friends, and my older churchy relatives, are in love with Kanan." Another fan added, "I think Colby and Kanan are gonna do very well for themselves in their respective fields." With Colby, another admirer thought, "I still think Colby has a legendary voice that could go down in history. I expect he'll receive the Corin Hawthorne treatment, which includes early exposure to their enormous ability followed by a huge career in the gospel CCM lane. Many runs. Indeed. However, she truly shown her ability, and I believe she has a great chance to succeed in her field." Fans speculated as to what may have lost Colby and Kanan their place on the show. Even if they were fans themselves, others might see why they departed. Among the remarks were the following: "Even though Kanan's performance was disorganized, I thought it was better than his previous ones. I enjoyed the runs he made at the end, and it seemed more endearing than his previous performances. Even though the song was simple to sing, it was obvious that he was anxious about stepping outside of his comfort zone. I'm very sorry to see Colby depart." Colby. Only one word, Judd. Isn't it strange that Kanan is voted out the first time he does anything that isn't gospel? It was planned out. Kanan had to leave the performance. They urged him to branch out from his gospel repertoire and focus on something else for the previous 3 weeks, and he eventually did. Then see what transpired. Even through the television screen, the anxious tension that permeated the American Idol studio was audible. There was an undertone of nervousness and a general holding of breath, which was different from the typical pre-show buzz of excitement. Tonight was the dreaded switch up, a gimmick that was meant to disrupt the competition's foundations and test the surviving candidates' mettle by matching them with mentors and musical genres that they would not have otherwise selected. And this turn of events would turn out to be a harsh, unanticipated cause for a night of startling quiet for one competitor, the internet forum's darling and the undeniable fan favorite. Sarah Jenkins had enthralled the country from the moment she took the stage for the audition. Her true warmth and modest charm were the only things that could match her voice, a crystalline instrument that could produce both sad lows and soaring highs. She wasn't the showy performer with the extravagant clothing or the theatrical demeanor. Because Sarah's love of music felt so genuine and unadulterated, she was the girl next door who you automatically cheered for. Her early concerts, which featured simple acoustic versions of modern songs and timeless ballads, had struck a deep chord with audiences and garnered her an almost ardent fan base. Fan art, #Team Sarah postings, and passionate calls for her to finish strong were all over social media. Many believed that she was the heir apparent to the Idol crown. Sarah had marched triumphantly in the weeks preceding the switch-up. Her standing as the front-runner was cemented with each performance. Superlatives abound in the judges' remarks, which were often cautious in their acclaim. The people agreed, voting her into the top ranks week after week. Luke Bryan had referred to her voice as a national treasure. Katy Perry had proclaimed her destined for greatness. Lionel Richie, ever the wise man, merely smiled and remarked, "You have that it factor, my dear." When the switch-up was announced, Sarah appeared invincible, a shining example of musical ability navigating the rough seas of reality TV with poise and ease. The regulations were straightforward but possibly disastrous. In a sharp contrast to their typical comfort zones, each surviving competitor would be paired with a mentor and a song from a different musical genre at random. The vocalists were supposed to be forced to change, mature, and demonstrate their adaptability. Some saw it as a thrilling challenge that would allow them to display a new aspect of their artistic abilities. A collective scream echoed through the studio audience when Sarah's name was called and her job was revealed. For some, it was a terrible idea, a potential minefield that might derail the goals. The Beat Boss, a renowned hip-hop producer and entrepreneur renowned for his sophisticated beats, complicated rhythms, and sometimes harsh lyrics, served as her tutor. The song she was given. Sarah first handled the news with her typical poise, but it was a high-energy, rap-infused song that was a far cry from the folk-infused pop and emotional ballads that had made her famous. She nodded, grinned, and showed excitement for the task. However, underneath the courageous exterior, a glimmer of fear flickered in her eyes. This has never been done before. Melody, emotive delivery, and the subtle display of vulnerability were her strong points. With its focus on rhythm, flow, and sometimes quick-fire delivery, rapping was a very other animal. The week before the show was filled with a flurry of rigorous practices. Sarah was pushed to her limits by the Beat Boss, a man with nothing to say but a great sense of music. He worked with her on the lyrics' complex phrasing, rhythm, and breath control. Ever the conscientious pupil, Sarah took in his lessons with a frown on her face as she struggled with a technique that was foreign to her. Her voice was raspy from the constant rehearsal, which frequently took place late at night. Even though they were encouraging, the other competitors couldn't help but feel uncomfortable for Sarah. They had witnessed her flourish in her role and dominate the stage with ease with a basic acoustic guitar. Her typical talents might not translate to this new world of intricate beats and quick-witted rhymes. The night of the switch-up performance arrived, and the anxiety in the studio was so intense that it could be sliced with a knife. With differing degrees of accomplishment, the other competitors had successfully negotiated the designated genres. Others had flourished, finding untapped abilities they had never been aware they had. After others faltered and gave awkward, forced performances, Sarah's moment came. The crowd's shout, which was evidence of her ongoing popularity, filled the room as her name was called. But as soon as the music began, a new enthusiasm took over. She began strong, her voice clear and powerful as she delivered the sung sections of the music. The Beat Boss's distinctive thunderous bass pumped through the speakers, a dramatic contrast to the delicate melodies often associated with Sarah. However, she started to perform with a slight hesitancy when the rap sections started. Despite being technically sound, her flow lacked the swagger and rhythm that defined the genre. She was accurate in her delivery of the lines, but lacked the smooth rhythm that made rap so captivating. The judges' expressions, which had previously been filled with adoration throughout Sarah's performances, were now a combination of disappointment and worry. Sarah's typical emotional connection and her ability to express vulnerability via her voice seemed to be lost in the fast-paced delivery. With their heads cocked, they listened carefully, seeking the enchantment they knew she contained. However, the magic appeared elusive, at least for this performance. The clapping that followed the music was kind and respectful, but it lacked the tremendous fervor that typically greeted Sarah's concerts. The room's vibe had changed. The judges' criticisms were mild but candid, upending the public's faith in her invincibility. Katy Perry appreciated the difficulties of the task but pointed out that Sarah's typical spark seemed to be absent. Luke Bryan commended her effort and her willingness to push herself, but he also observed that the performance seemed a little stiff. With his usual sagacity, Lionel Richie discussed the value of authenticity and how, although Sarah had performed the role properly, it didn't seem like her. Ever kind, Sarah quietly took their criticism with grace. She recognized the challenge and the important lessons she had gained. But instead of the intense passion and vulnerability that typically glowed in her eyes, a calm despair took its place. The online community exploded as the voting lines opened. The typical unflinching confidence was now tinged with fear, but Team Sarah was still out in force. The fairness of the switch-up and whether it was intended to help competitors develop or just to trip them up were hot topics of discussion. Some claimed that Sarah's expertise was in a totally different field and that she had been assigned an impossible assignment. Some argued that a real artist ought to be able to work in any genre. The elimination show the following night was a heated event. The faces of the remaining competitors were marked with a mix of anxiety and optimism as they stood on stage. As the competitors were deemed secure and escorted to the side of the stage, the results were called out one by one. When the bottom three were revealed, the anxiety increased. It was anticipated that two competitors who had had trouble with their switch-up performances would be present. However, the studio was filled with a collective gasp that was even greater than the one from the night before when the third name was called. Jenkins, Sarah. In the bottom three was the crowd favorite, the unchallenged front-runner. The audience went silent in shock, then murmured incredulously. The response on social media was swift and vehement. Within minutes, the hashtag #JusticeForSarah became viral throughout the globe. The other competitors on stage displayed similar disbelief, their expressions a combination of confusion and pity. Ever calm, Sarah stood with her head held high and a faint, melancholy grin on her lips. As Ryan Seacrest got ready to reveal who would be leaving for home, the tension in the room was tremendous. "And the contestant leaving us tonight is," Ryan's words seemed to linger in the air for a very long time as the camera turned to Sarah, who had tears shimmering in her eyes as they reflected the bright studio lights. "Sarah Jenkins." The words struck like a hammer. The audience sent out a collective sigh of despair. The other competitors seemed obviously terrified on stage. Sarah moved forward, her poise finally breaking as a single tear trickled down her cheek. Her fellow bottom three competitors appeared completely startled, their expressions displaying a mixture of relief and sincere sadness. She gave the other competitors hugs while whispering encouraging words in an emotional manner. When she stepped in front of the audience for her last performance, the stillness was deafening, a sharp contrast to the tremendous acclaim she typically got. The judges' usual stoicism was replaced with a look of genuine grief. She decided to perform one of her well-known songs, which highlighted the unadulterated beauty and emotional range of her voice. In that instant, she was the Sarah that everyone had fallen in love with, unencumbered by the switch-up. As the last chords of her song lingered in the air, the audience sent out a thundering applause, a desperate attempt to convey their unshakable support and somehow change the result. Her voice soared, her emotion palpable, a devastating reminder of the talent being destroyed. However, it was too late. The fact that she had been eliminated became clear as she left the stage, saying goodbye to the audience's sorrowful expressions. Everyone's favorite, the one they all thought would win, was gone. Sarah's abrupt departure was caused by the switch-up, a surprise intended to test and push her. The fallout from Sarah's removal was devastating. Fans questioned the fairness of the competition and the effect of the switch-up, and the online community remained furious. Many said that competitors had been unjustly punished for daring to attempt something new and for venturing outside of their comfort zones. In the days that followed, Sarah gave interviews, speaking with her typical grace and humility. The judges were criticized for not having any say in the eliminations at this point, leaving the contestants' fates entirely up to the public vote, which had apparently turned against her after her one perceived blunder. She conveyed her appreciation for the chance, her followers' encouragement, and the knowledge she had gained. She defended her choice to accept the challenge even though she admitted that the switch-up performance wasn't her best. She was aware of the unpredictability of reality TV and the fact that even the most gifted contestants occasionally encountered unforeseen obstacles. Sarah's shocking elimination served as a sobering reminder of both the public vote's power and the unpredictability of American Idol, particularly when swayed by a contentious twist like the switch-up. Although Sarah's tenure on American Idol was brief, her influence was evident. It brought to light the delicate balance between artistic development and audience expectations, as well as how a single performance, even one in which a contestant is forced to step outside of their comfort zone, can significantly change the course of their journey. Her brilliance and sincere personality had won over millions of hearts. Even though her followers were devastated by her removal, it cemented her place as a popular character and demonstrated the value of genuineness in a society where manufactured drama is the norm. Sarah continued to pursue her music career in the years that followed, putting out albums and performing to sold-out shows. Her ardently devoted fan following was created in the American Idol furnace. Even though many people were still hurt by her surprise exclusion, it eventually became a part of her tale and served as a reminder of the erratic path an artist takes and the timeless power of a voice that speaks to the spirit. On that fateful night, the hum of the audience may have died down, but Sarah Jenkins's music persisted, demonstrating her ability that the switch-up was only able to temporarily suppress. In addition to serving as a warning about the dangers of reality TV plots, her experience served as an example of perseverance and the will to follow one's passion even after the brightest lights of the Idol stage had gone out.